community page. I'm Patty Baker, and each Thursday I come to you with a message broadcasted to you typically live. And I'm kind of thinking about jumping over to YouTube. Haven't done that yet, but we've just had so many technical difficulties here on Facebook with doing live broadcasts. So when I do that, I will let you know. But anyway, I'm glad you're joining me wherever you are, whatever time it is in your part of the world. I'm glad that you could join me at this time. And for those of you who are joining recorded, always give me a shout out in the comments because I like to come back and see that you stopped by. Tonight's topic is about emotional health. Here at Live on Purpose, we believe in living on purpose. And that means with our whole being, heart, soul, mind, and strength. That includes being fully engaged in our emotional health, spiritual health, intellectual health, our physical health. I had somebody yesterday ask me, what is intellectual health? It's where you're growing and you're learning, you're growing by learning new things, and you're keeping your mind sharp in that way. Emotional health, that's where we're dealing with our feelings and our emotions. It's connected to our heart. And this page is also about taking all of those areas of our being and loving God, loving others, and loving ourselves. Not in a way that's selfish, but in a way that is healthy for us. There's nothing wrong with taking a moment to take care of ourselves. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight when we talk about emotional health. I talked about this topic a few weeks ago, and so this was kind of a after question that came after that night where I was talking about how to do brain surgery on yourself, and I'll drop the link right here in the comments. If you're joining recorded, it's popping up for you now. And if you're joining live, once this goes recorded, you can come back into the comments and find it. How to do brain surgery on yourself. And I talked about how to get through some of the emotional baggage that kind of bogs us down, and how to get past that. And just as a quick recap for that, we have an experience and there's an emotion that's attached to it, and then our body begins to process that emotion, and that becomes a feeling. So once that memory goes into once that experience goes into our memory bank, every time something triggers it, then we have that feeling come up, and now we begin to attach it to other things. So I talked about how to bring that emotion back up through that memory, and how to work through your response to that emotion, and as a result, begin to kind of move past those triggers where we can get into patterns of unhealthy behavior in order to manage those emotions. Oftentimes those lead into addictions, tics that we tend to have in our behavior, or it could even be, seriously, I've seen this. There's just such a fear that it blocks someone from doing something. A fear of heights, a fear of swimming, a fear of spiders, a fear of whatever, because something triggered that, and then they're not really focused on it. So tonight we're going to talk about emotional health, but not from the fact of doing brain surgery on ourselves, but what do you do when there's someone in your life who their emotions are coming out on you, on everybody else around you, and you're just like, man, this is really zapping me of my energy, and how do I deal with someone else who's coming to me with their emotional baggage? And sometimes it's easy to just say, you know what, I'm slow to respond to their text, I don't return to phone calls right away, I'm slower to respond, and then by the time I get to them, they've already moved on to something else, and I'm just not dealing with them. But that's not oftentimes a luxury that we have if we work with them, if we're in school with them, if they are a loved one in our immediate family, if they're our children. And so how do you deal with people who are vomiting their emotional baggage all over the place? So I want to just give you a couple of tips that you can kind of work on that I think might be helpful. Because your emotions are wired to what you believe and what you value. And the feelings that come out of that could be anything, an adrenaline rush, calmness, peacefulness, muscle tension, your heart's racing. I mentioned sweaty palms a minute ago. So when you're dealing with someone who has a lot of emotion that they're unloading on you, positive or negative, extremely elated, happy people walk into a situation, you're like, man, can you just dial it down a little bit? That whole thing just a little overwhelming for me, right? So they're not able to fully rein in their emotions because they're still trying to process, and how they're doing that is by revamping the story, or something keeps triggering that event that initially caused it, and all of the memories that are attached to that experience. And so every time it's triggered, then something else comes up. How do you deal with people like that in your life that you can't easily set boundaries for? And I think it requires some really good communication skills with them. And I would, if you don't have the time to do it right then, and let me tell you, with kids, when you're dealing with kids and their emotions and the feelings that are attached to those, and they're creating memories quicker because they're younger, right? And so they're experiencing new things. And if something causes an experience for them where they're feeling a negative emotion, and that's creating these feelings behind it, which either grips them with fear or causes them to have some other place where they can't really process it through, then they're going to begin to develop behaviors that aren't healthy. And as we become adults, you can see where that plays out. So your emotions are wired into what you believe and what you value. And so they're wired into your spirit and they're wired into your human nature. So you just can't go and say, well, get over it. That doesn't work. But one of the things that you can do is you can compartmentalize it and say, I understand that this is an issue for you, but I can't talk to you about it right now, but I'd like to schedule a time to talk to you about it later. You can do that with another adult. With kids, it might be just a matter of having a parent moment or having a teaching moment and saying, hey, I understand that this is really scary for you. What is making it so scary for you? And then begin to kind of talk that out. Why don't you want to do this? And they may say, I don't want to get my head wet in the shower because, and then they list the X, Y, Z of the reason why. And here we find out that when they were in the bathtub at 2 years old, their older sibling pushed their head under the water that was running in the tub, and now they have a fear of it, right? And we didn't know it happened, but it did, and now they have a fear of putting their head under the shower head to get the soap out of their hair. So you're having to walk through that situation and then walk them back through in a positive way. I think oftentimes we don't take time to listen to people to understand their emotions. We usually come with it as labeling them, and then we judge them, rather than saying, I receive what you're saying and I accept what you're saying. So what happens is we just kind of shuffle it off and move on. But in a place of loving others, I think it's good that if someone has enough to be able to come to you and say, hey, I've got this going on, that you can hear them out and give them some perspective about give them, not a perspective, but give them, respond to them is a good word. Respond to them from a place of acceptance. I accept you, I receive you right where you are. I understand that you are feeling sad right now because of this divorce, for example. And so let's talk that out. This is raw, this is real, they have heartbreak, there's a lot of emotion that's in there that could come from betrayal, it could come from any number of things, right? So you don't really know what you're tapping into at the moment. But oftentimes, people then at some point begin to circle back around and around and around. And now they're just replaying this stuff consistently because they haven't had a safe place to talk and then to say, I accept how you feel. And I'm not judging where you are, I just accept you. And then ask them what they've done to move forward. Because oftentimes what happens is they get so stuck in labeling where they've been that they can't move on. So giving them a place where you can kind of nudge them forward in that conversation and say, okay, that's where you've been, and this is where you are now. What's the next step to move on from there? What are you doing to listen, right? And ask not, and when you're listening to them, then what you can do is you can say, what I'm hearing you say is, right? Or you can kind of reframe what they told you so that it acknowledges to them that they understand you, or that you understand them. So when you're listening, you're listening, and you just said active listening, Brandy. It's just popped up for me. I'm about 15 seconds behind, but you've got to listen to people. I think a lot of times we're like, ugh, don't want to deal with it, you know? Have you ever been at the stoplight when you're with, and all of a sudden there's a homeless person with their sign, and you just don't see him. Now all of a sudden you're looking at your phone. You can't wait for that light to turn green because you don't want to deal with what's happening right there outside your window. So you're diverting your attention, you're diverting your eyes just so you can get past it, them, the situation, the moment. And it's the same thing with people who are dealing with some emotion and feelings that are attached to that they're wanting a safe place, and you're just like, okay, don't want to deal with that. Let's move on from there, right? So when you're dealing with a person, and I don't mean dealing in a bad way, but when you have a person in your life who is needing a safe place to talk, or they are just automatically sharing the feelings that they have, accept it, don't judge it, right? Oh, you shouldn't feel that way. Oh, that's okay, it'll pass. Yeah, you're just being over emotional. You're just, suck it up, buttercup. Those types of things don't work. People respond and react to experiences, the same experience. Each person that is a part of that experience receives it indifferently, internalizes it differently based upon how they're wired and what their experiences are, and what's triggering the emotion that's there from other memories that are already in their brain. So again, you can go back and do brain surgery on yourself. I talked about that a few weeks ago. I'll drop the link in here. But tonight's follow-up question is about how do you deal with people who are coming at you with all this emotional stuff? Because it's one thing to do brain surgery on yourself, but you can't do brain surgery on everybody. And you're right, you can't. But what you can do is accept people where they are. Don't judge them for where they are, right? We're called to love God, love others, not love God and judge others. So love people where they are. Accept them in the situation with the emotion that they have, and then listen to what they're saying. Reframe it so that they know that you get them. And then say, I understand where you've been based upon what you've told me. Don't say, oh, I know what you went through. Oh, I get it. Because you don't. You really don't. You don't get what I've been through. I don't get what you've gone through because I've never been there with everything that you've got in your being in that moment. I may have been in the exact same moment. I may experience the exact same thing you did, but I processed it differently than you. So on some level, we don't fully 100% get people understand and all that other stuff. But what you can do is very gently accept people, don't judge people, listen. Some people will vomit their emotion for hours if you let them. Others, they just want to get it out and then they're done. And it allows them to feel what they need to feel at the time, because it's a good thing if they're wanting to process through the emotion. But oftentimes people don't know when it's appropriate to do that. And if they have been harboring these feelings for a long time and they haven't had a chance, then everything that's going to trigger whatever it was is going to continue to hit them. And then they're just, the vileness is going to continue to come out of them, especially bitterness or whatever it is, because of the negative emotion that they've had for so long that's now being triggered by every little thing else, every other little thing that's happening. So accept people where they are. Actively listen, as Brandy said, actively listen to what they're saying. And then don't allow them to stay in their mess. I hear what you're saying about where you've been, and I understand based upon what you've told me where you are. But what's your next step beyond this? What's the next step? Because oftentimes it's just for the moment. I lost back in February a very, 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 very close friend of mine. I did not feel this kind of heartbreak ever in my life. And I thought, gosh, I don't know what to do with this emotion. It was so overwhelming for me. It was the loss of a friend. And such a close friend. And so what I did was I just laid down on my bed and I said, God, help me to find someone that I can intimately share this friendship I had with this best friend of mine and now have lost, so that I can get some help to talk it out through my emotion. And I allowed myself to cry. I allowed myself all that. It was good, but it wasn't enough. And so I reached out to another friend and I said, hey, I am a crying, blubbering mess. My eyes are swollen. My hair's in a ponytail. I'm in sweats and I need a safe place to talk. And she said, I will have a house cleaned out with kids and husband in about 2 hours. Would you like to come over? And I said, yes, that would be great. And so I went over and she had a glass of water for me and we sat down. She had a box of tissues and she listened. That was it. She didn't give advice. She didn't do anything. She just listened to me. And I don't even know if she could really hear or understand half of what I was saying because I was just crying through the whole thing. The ache in my heart from the loss of this best friend was so devastating to me. And she said, what are you actually feeling right now? And I said, I just feel really warm from all the crying. My head hurts. I feel nauseous. I was telling her everything that I was feeling. And she said, what is the emotion that you're feeling? And I said, I just feel grief. Just this utter grief, like this guttural, there's nothing I can do to bring them back. Just, I feel, and she said, what's the emotion? And I said, I'm angry. I'm angry that they're gone. I'm angry I can't do anything about it. I'm angry. And she said, what other emotions are you feeling? And so she walked me through not just the feelings, right? Because emotions are one thing. Feelings are those physical manifestations that are coming out of those emotions. I talk about that through how to do brain surgery on yourself. Again, if you didn't listen to that, the link's in here on the comments when this goes recorded if you're watching live. So she listened to me. I'm telling you, you've got to listen to where people are. At the end of that, she said to me, I know that this is too soon, but as you're grieving, what can you do to protect the good memories that you had of this best friend? And then begin to carry those in your heart as you process through your grief. So what she was doing was, don't stay there in that pit of negative emotion. And grief is not a negative emotion, it's a natural emotion, but sometimes we label it, right? I'm even labeling it now. But it's an emotion that weighs us down, and it zaps us of our energy. And when people come to us with a lot of emotional baggage, it zaps us of our energy, right? So emotion is energy. And the feelings that are coming out of that is the energy that's in our body, right? So there's an emotional connection and a physical connection that's happening there, and then it's anchored in that memory, or a host of memories. So I decided that I would go ahead and just take some photos off my phone and print them over at Walmart. You can do that, and I made a little collage of my friend and I honored our relationship for what it was over the years. Went to school together. I mean, just a great friend, and just honored that friend in that way, so that I could look at these photos and begin to process and move forward. You know, if we don't have a safe place to do that, we're going to vomit on other people. And oftentimes when you see people emotionally vomiting, it's because they haven't had a safe place for anyone to hear them. Recently, I was traveling and I met a young man, 24 years old, and we're chit-chatting as we're waiting. And we probably had 90 minutes where we were sitting together. I didn't know him. I just said, "Hey, how you doing? Where are you going? What's going on? How's your life? Blah, blah, blah." And as we're sitting there in this waiting area, he said, he asked if I had any kids, and I said no. And he said, "Well, I have a 2-year-old," and he's showing me the photos on his phone and all this other stuff, and just going through me. So proud of him. And then he says to me, "I'm not with my baby's mama, but I love her, and I'm emotionally attached to her, but I can't commit to her right now." And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Well, I met another woman, and we had a sexual relationship, and she had just left her boyfriend, and so I was a rebound, and she got pregnant. And 7 weeks in, she had an abortion. And I have been angry about it since then." And I said, "How are you feeling about that? Like, what are your feelings?" And he goes, "I'm sad. I feel sad." And I said, "Well, how does that feel?" Like, he goes, "At the pit of my stomach, I just feel like I did something wrong." And he said, "I didn't really have a choice in it. But then again, I put myself in that situation." He went on about that. So he felt guilt. He said, I feel guilty. And when I feel guilty, I just feel downcast. I don't want to do anything. I get depressed." And I said, "Yeah, I can understand how those feelings and emotions kind of get wrapped up." And I said, "You know, I understand what you're saying of where you've been. And I know where you're saying that you are right now based upon what you've told me. So what's the next step? Is there closure with this other woman? Is there a place where you're having to confess at some point?" And he goes, "You know, I kind of think I'm doing that now." And I said, "Yeah, I kind of think you are." And I said, "I don't know if you know God or anything, Jesus, nothing like that." He goes, "No, I would never walk into church." And I said, "That's okay. Going to church doesn't make you a believer in God any more than going to McDonald's makes you a hamburger. But do you believe that there is a creator of this universe, God, beyond you and I?" And he said, "Absolutely, I do." I said, "Good. Then you believe that God works all things together for good?" And he said, "No, I don't think I believe that." And I said, "Okay, well, let's start there." And so I walked him through who Jesus is and why he died. The man did not, this 24-year-old man did not commit his life to Jesus in that moment. But he knows who he is now. But he said, "I don't know why, but I feel so much lighter and better because I've been able to talk this out." I didn't know that man. I have my iPad. I got stuff to do. I don't have time to be chit-chatting with people while I'm waiting for other things to happen. I don't want to waste time. I got things to do, folks. You do too. Who's got time to be into all that mess? That's his deal. It ain't mine. I got other things to do. God calls us in the moment. Love God, love others. And I love that man in that moment. And out of that, he said he felt lighter. That he realized that it was a mistake and that there was nothing he could do about it now. And he's able to begin what I called for him a healing process. And that I recommended, if it's going to help you with closure, to go back to that woman and just tell her that you're sorry, and and talk to her the way I talked to you, that it might help her and it might help you, and you guys might be able to have some sort of resolution, some healing, some forgiveness, some grace. It was good. But I think I left that man better than when I found him. And I know that he left me better. Better than when I met him. Because you see, when you open yourself up to hear other people's struggles, you realize everybody's normal till you get to know them. And I think that if we would extend just a little bit of time to others, to allow them, hey, this lady in the office is such a bitch. Why does she always come in here with a chip on her shoulder every day? She doesn't talk to anybody. When she does, it's never her fault. She's always doing this, that, and the other. And I can't stand to be around. Nobody can stand to be around her. Well, then maybe I'll invite her to lunch. Maybe. Maybe you might find out there's a trigger there. Maybe you might find out a little bit more about her. Maybe you might understand her. Maybe you might just help her walk through some healing. Not coming at her from a place of judgment, but from a place of love. And so as we talk about emotional health, and we don't want people vomiting on us because it drains us of our energy, I'm asking you to just look at it from a little different perspective and say, yeah, I know. I get it. But at some point, maybe we need to set aside just a little bit of time, a few minutes, and say, hey, I love you, I receive you, I accept you, what do you got? This is where I am. And be vulnerable. Allow people to be vulnerable. And when we can do that with others, as we do with ourselves and our emotional health, the world becomes a better place. Because now there's a place of understanding, like that we get it. And we begin to walk a little slower, drive a little slower, be a little kinder, let people in on the lane. I have a post out there that's been seen by almost 25,000 people. My prayer team, I keep telling them, man, 10,000 people saw this in a day. 20,000 people have seen this like in 3 days. And I got 25,000 people have seen this in almost a week. And I said, why is it, God, that this post is making it so, it says tip your server. Let somebody in the lane ahead of you. What are you doing? You're just being otherly. And you're doing that out of love. And when you stop and get out of your selfishness and just get otherly in the moment, and I'm not talking about being a martyr and all this other stuff. I mean, just kindness. It's amazing what this world opens up to be. So as we're loving others, when we're dealing with someone who you can see obviously has some emotional stuff that they're dealing with, see if you can take a moment, set some appropriate boundaries with people when you need to, because sometimes the boundaries are not only to protect you, but protect them too, right? But love them right where they are. Accept them. Don't judge them. Actively listen. And then try and walk them from a place of, I know where you've been based upon what you've told me, and I understand where you are now based upon what you're telling me. But what's the next step for closure for this, or healing for this, or whatever? And help them just one step in that direction. Emotional health. Our heart and our body and our mind and our spirit are all wrapped together. And so all of us are affected in that way, right? And Ray, you're right. You know, sometimes it's just a compliment, right? You just say, hey. You know, anytime I roll up on a woman, I say, hello, beautiful. And some of them are like, what, me? You know, when was the last time somebody called you beautiful? Every woman I see, whether it's the cashier, whatever, I say, hello, beautiful. I had a guy that I met here last week during a business meeting, and he said, I always pay for my meal twice. Whatever my meal is, I give it in a tip. It's like, wow, okay. And I met another guy this week. He said he was buying a new skateboard, and he said for him it was nothing. You know, he goes in and he upgrades and gets all this stuff, and this little 5-6-year-old kid keeps coming into this skateboard shop, and he wants something just a little bit different. He's trying to get used parts, and so he's trying to build his own. And this guy says, hey, son, what are you doing? He says, oh, I'm trying to build this. He goes, oh, well, if you could have this, what would it be? He goes, oh, I would have it this, this, and this. And he was giving name brands of what he would want on it. And he goes, really? He said, yeah, what kind of trucks would you want on it? He told him. He goes, good. He said, well, the next time that boy comes in, set him up with what he wants. And he paid for it. And he said, I want to instill in that young man that he's got a chance. You know, he's showing the effort. He's doing what he can do. But he said that boy lit up with happiness and joy that he was working so hard to build his own skateboard. And then this man also caught the vision for what he wanted and helped him to get what he needed. He said, hey, if it keeps him off the streets and keeps him out of gangs and it allows him to do something fun, I want to encourage that, right? And he said the emotion, the feeling that I had by giving to him and what I saw in his emotion, that energy that was being exchanged was good. And when we're able to take that negative energy that's coming off to somebody with all that emotional baggage and be able to give them the positive, like you're saying, Ray, give them some healthy, good energy and say, hey, let me tell you who God is. Let me tell you about this joy that I have and why I have it in the midst of my own mess, right? So I hope that tonight's emotional health and how to deal with the emotional health of others will help you in your relationships with your children, with your spouse, with your immediate family, with your coworkers, with your fellow students, with your community, with your church. Love God, love others, and love yourself. Good night.